Hello and welcome to this, the final round of day one here at Grand Prix Atlanta. The format is Kaladesh Sealed Deck. I'm Tim Willoughby here with Hall of Famer Frank Karsten, and we have a pretty big matchup for you. It's Cedric Phillips up against Chris Fennell. We'll get those names sorted out for you in a second there. But both of these decks, we were talking about it just before the round started, they're both quite aggressive, but neither of them are what I would say is a deck replete with bombs. These are just solid, aggressive decks with a good curve of creatures and some removal and or combat tricks.
Yeah, and then there is some particularly good card. For instance, Chris Fennell has a Cultivator of Blades. Cedric Phillips has a Demon of Dark Schemes. So there is some standout still, but by and large, these are not the bomb-laden decks that some people might have expected at the 8-0 table. It's just a bunch of good stuff. Two colors, 17 lands, a reasonable curve, some vehicles. Chris Fennell has 3 vehicles in his deck. Cedric Phillips plays as many as 5.
Yeah,
which is a lot, but
I think it's high water. But Salivating Gremlins to kick things off is actually great for Cedric with all of those vehicles. It gets triggered by vehicles coming into play, does all sorts of good stuff. We see Inventor's Goggles there for Chris Fennell, which is one of my picks for cards that's gone up in my estimation. A shame that he didn't have a creature. A bigger shame that he didn't have a third land yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a peculiar assortment of artifacts on Chris Fennell's side. It's 5 mana, Word of Cards on the table, and it does literally nothing at the moment. No creature to pilot the Sky Skiff, no creature to put the Inventor's Goggles on, and Cedric Phillips will be happy to crash in for 4 damage.
Yeah, Chris just kind of hoarding trinkets while Cedric Phillips playing a Prakata Pillarbug, able to attack in for 4. He's got mana up to give lifelink to his Pillarbug if he's got anything to block, but right now, Chris Fennell is a mono-green deck without any creatures.
And perhaps Cedric forgot the trigger or missed something here, as apparently he only dealt 2 damage with the Salivating Gremlins. Well, happens.
So High Spire Artisan immediately getting Goggles. It is an Artificer. All the creatures with Fabricate that are not artifact creatures themselves are Artificers. So naturally it would be a 0/3 +1/+1 because it's fabricated into having an extra counter, and then a further +1/+2 means that actually we're talking about a 2/6, which against the aggressive deck that Cedric Phillips has going might well be a really nice addition.
Hey, it blocks. It can even pilot a Sky Skiff if it comes to that. Looks like Cedric did attack for 4 on the previous turn. We just didn't put down the life totals correctly.
And Unlicensed Disintegration, a big one here. This is the moment where High Spire Artisan decides to briefly make sure that the Sky Skiff is going to be able to get into a little bit of a rumble here before being killed off. And with an artifact in play, that does mean Chris taking an extra 3. Big swings here from Cedric Phillips, and this is what he's been doing all day long, just getting stuck in for damage very persistently and consistently. And those decks that were planning on playing big bombs on turns 5, 6, 7, Cedric's saying, well, by turn 5, 6, 7, I might already be shuffling up to get you in game 2.
Yeah, and or play Unlicensed Disintegration on your bomb. That card fits so well in the red-black archetype. At this point, Chris may be regretting his decision to put an extra counter on the High Spire Artisan rather than just make a servo token against that Unlicensed Disintegration. Would have been better off with a servo token, but, well, here are a couple of them.
Yeah, Visionary Augmenter making 2 servos with Fabricate, also picking up Goggles, affectionately known as Ripley, the 2/1 dwarf with Fabricate 2.
So now it will be more difficult for Cedric to put down a reasonable attack. Maybe if he plays an artifact that Salivating Gremlins can still get in there, but yeah, then it probably just gets blocked by, say, Visionary Augmenter and a Sky Skiff, for example, which means that you only trade the Salivating Gremlins for 1 creature on the other side. That's not great. That Prakata Pillarbug is not going to be able to attack into the 3/3 Visionary Augmenter. So unless Cedric manages to perhaps find a good removal spell or develop his board with some harder hitting creatures, Chris Fennell is stabilizing. And because he missed some land drops early on in the game, it's also clear to Cedric that Chris has all kinds of non-land cards in hand and will be able to develop his board position if he is given the chance.
Oval Chase Daredevil there, the play from Cedric Phillips. It's a 4-2 that anytime an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, if it's in your graveyard, you can return it to your hand. And there's quite a few nice little interactions that you can get with this one, but not least of which, it just gets to keep attacking and or blocking and potentially come back quite a bit.
Yeah, when we were discussing this card in our limited meeting for the Pro Tour, someone asked the question, is this more of an aggressive card or more of a defensive card? And the answer is, well, it's both. It does both roles perfectly well. As long as you have enough artifacts in your deck or fabricate creatures to keep triggering it, it will happily attack, and it will happily block any big 3 or 4 drops on the other side, trading and then getting back. Speaking of some of the combos, with Key to the City, it could be pretty sweet. Same with Quicksmith Genius, essentially cards that discard and draw. You can just keep recurring Oval Chase Daredevil from the graveyard, as long as you have enough artifacts in your deck.
So Riparian Tiger, the play there for Chris Fennell. So that now happily the biggest creature on the board, a 4/4 Trampler that gives him 2 energy, and he can spend that energy when he attacks in order to give it +2/+2 until end of turn. So we see Chris Fennell, he's very much following the green-white archetype kind of to a T. He's going wide, he's making a lot of creatures, and has a fairly impressive looking board here. Meanwhile, Cedric Phillips, he's doing the red-black thing very effectively, which is aggression and artifacts just making everything you do being more powerful.
Yep. I mean, all the colors in Kaladesh have something to do with energy. The theme is distributed throughout. Most of the colors also have something to do with artifacts. Green, white, and black all have fabricate. So many of the color combinations can do it all, but there are some things that certain color combinations excel at. Just have a few more cards than the other colors to do with a certain theme, and that's artifacts for red-black, and well, fabricate/go white for white-green.
So an attack here from the Oval Chase Daredevil, and it's kind of a free attack potentially for Cedric if he's got an artifact in hand. Chris kind of has to block. He's got to watch out for his life total a little bit, throws 2 servos in the way, and if there's an artifact from Cedric Phillips here, well, the Daredevil could be coming right back.
Yep. Yeah, it's a nice grindy card. No artifact, that's just a lawless broker.
Yeah, the solid little creature, 3/1. When it dies, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on something. Pillarbug loves to have a +1/+1 counter. A couple more mana, and there's a Dr. Sentry. Sorry, Dundoperative. There we go. Sorry.
Yeah, a 2/2, which is one of the better 2-drops in the format, actually. It's, well, a 2/2 for 2 is already playable, and getting +1/+0 and that touch whenever you control an artifact is definitely a useful ability. 3/2 for 2 mana is a very good size, and, well, Cedric could even trade it for the Riparian Tiger. May have to take some trample damage in the process, and it's also not guaranteed to work in case Chris Fennell has, say, an impeccable timing in hand or some kind of trick to deal with any blockers. But generally speaking, Dund Operative will be happy to trade for what is currently looking to be a 6/6 Trampler.
Yeah, the fact that you have to use that ability on the Riparian Tiger at the point that it attacks, you choose whether or not to spend the energy or not, is obviously a little bit less flexible than some of the other energy options, but a 6/6 Trampler is nothing to sneeze at no matter which way you slice it.
That said, even though that might be a nice trade, this is a super aggressive attack by Chris Fennell. Right? He's at 11 life to Cedric's 22. He currently has no creatures left. Ooh, Wispweaver Angel. That explains the aggressive attack. Wow.
That's a way of rebuilding your board. So Wispweaver Angel, when it comes into play, the 4/4 flyer lets you flicker. So exile another creature you control, then immediately return it onto the battlefield. He chooses to flicker the Visionary Augmenter. It immediately gets re-equipped to the Inventor's Goggles, and it immediately makes 2 more servos. The first set of servos that traded off with Oval Chase Daredevil, there's now another couple to replace them. And of course, a 4/4 flyer on this board is a big deal, and Chris will absolutely have been looking to try and find a way of getting Cedric's life total down a little bit lower so that he can finally finish him off.
Yeah, when Cedric decided not to block the Riparian Tiger, he was probably thinking, well, Chris is now attacking, he has no blockers remaining. Hey, I have 4 creatures. What's he going to do afterwards? Present maybe 2 blockers? that's fine, I can attack into that, I'll just take the damage. Well, little did he know, there are now 4 blockers. And some good ones too. I don't see a great attack at this point. If Cedric, for instance, would attack with everything, just go all out, without playing an artifact before combat, a Salivating Gremlins or a Prakata Pillar Bug could be blocked by the 3/3 Visionary Augmenter. Lawless Broker could get blocked by the Wispreaver Angel. Dunt Operative, if Chris feels like it, could get double blocked by the Servos. So those are not going to be profitable attacks for Cedric Phillips. He'll lose a lot of creatures, and Chris Fennell won't lose any of his creatures, except for perhaps some Servos.
I've been really impressed by this deck from Chris Fennell, and of course the way he's playing it. I mean, the fact that it's a deck that's not characterized by having individual super powerful cards, but just from enacting the plan that's the natural plan for green-white. I mean, yes, it's got some particularly good ways of doing that. Cultivator of Blades is fantastic. That you have got Chief of the Foundry in order to pump your various servo tokens that you're making with Fabricate. But this is not the sort of deck that you, Dear Diary moment, you know, like, wow, I opened the best sealed deck I've ever opened.
No, it's just solid, but nothing too special.
Servos, again, able to trade for one of Cedric Phillips' creatures.
2 of them. So this is still kind of an aggressive attack by Cedric here. He could have tried to trade his Dunt Operative for Riparian Tiger on the attack of Chris Fennell. That is likely to happen. But he attacks with the Dunt Operative in the hope of indeed trading it for 2 blockers. This may signal that Cedric has some way to do the last point of damage and just wants to limit Chris Fennell's number of potential blockers.
So here we see Scrap Heap Scrounger from Chris. Now, his deck doesn't naturally produce black mana using swamps, but there is that copy of Prophetic Prism in play, meaning that the 3/2 which can't block, it is possible for him to get it back from the graveyard by exiling another creature card and paying 1 and a black.
It's actually the only black source in Chris Fennell's entire deck. But
a 2-mana 3/2 is still a pretty exciting rate, though.
It is. It can trade for most 3-drops, which is something that many 2-cost creatures cannot say.
It also crews pretty much every vehicle you'd ever want to crew. And I think that that's actually, if you're looking for differences in the way that Chris Fennell has built this deck to the way that many people would, I think that that may well be one of the differences.
Just checking that he has enough power on the table to crew all of his vehicles. That can definitely inform your choices for the creature base. Oh, some flyers coming in here. There's still a Riparian Tiger as a blocker. I also spotted a Sky Whaler Shot in Chris Fennell's hand. Could be helpful in case Cedric decides to make his Salivating Gremlins a bit bigger, for instance, destroying any creature with power 3 or greater. And the fact that Cedric is thinking signals that he has some kind of instant speed removal spell, because none of his creatures are flying. He cannot really... well, he can block the Visionary Augmenter. Perhaps double block it with 2 of his 2/3s.
Goes for a straightforward removal spell in Tidy Conclusion. It's going to gain him a life as well. He has 1 artifact in play. And killing the biggest threat on the board, that 4/4 flyer.
Definitely a good use of the removal spell.
Fennell's deck does have a copy of Avery Mechanic, so he has extra ways of rebuying or re-flickering his creatures. We've already seen him do some nifty stuff with that angel there, but that's not the only way he has of getting multiple uses out of his coming into play abilities.
Yeah, what Cedric may have been thinking about is essentially playing out the damage race several turns ahead in his in his head. As in, he could also have kept the Tidy Conclusion to take down the Riparian Tiger, just take a bunch of damage in the air and then like attack with his creatures over the course of the next few turns. But he probably felt that that would not allow him to win the damage race still, not when there are 6 power worth of flyers coming his way, and the likelihood of Chris Fennell playing another blocker after combat. And I think I like that decision indeed.
So a nice one here from Chris Fennell. In other circumstances, Armorcraft Judge can potentially draw you a lot of cards, but it is also an artificer. So it does get to pick up those goggles for free. And that's something that we just see has happened again and again and again for Fennell's deck. You could almost say that it's a tribal deck where the only tribal interaction is those goggles. Inventor's goggles getting picked up all over the place.
Yeah, it's actually the only relevant creature type in Kaladesh, except for dwarves on the Pala and
Servos and Thopters get pumped by...
I guess there's a random Thopter in Snare Thopter that gets pumped, but generally when you're drafting, it can pay off to check in between the boosters whether you have a good amount of artificers in case you see such an Inventor's Goggles sometime later, but that's the only creature type that really matters, at least at common.
So the bouncer has come into play for Cedric Phillips. That they're the Prakata Club security. A 3/4 for 4. A very happy set of stats, which is just as well because there's nothing else going on with the card beyond flavor text.
Yep, but 4 toughness is definitely huge in this format. There are lots of 3/2s. For instance, that Scapeep Scrounger, but also many of the 3-drops are 3/2. And 3/4 is an excellent trump to that.
So the Tiger's got its goggles on and is coming in as a 5/6 trampler.
Yeah, so this is kind of a suspect attack because 5/6 means that Cedric could just block it, say with 2 of his 3/4s. And if Chris Fennell has nothing, then Cedric would effectively trade a 3/4 for, well, a much bigger creature. And I don't think Chris Fennell would make that attack without any backup. Indeed, Chris Fennell does have Sky Whaler shot in hand. And yeah, Cedric must realize that. That's also why he goes for the triple block. Basically putting down an extra creature in case Chris Fennell has a +2/+2 effect, like a Build to Last. But against specifically the Sky Whaler shot, it's not going to help. Chris Fennell can take down 1 of the 3/4s, and then there will only be 5 power total blocking the Riparian Tiger, which is not enough to take it down. The good news for Cedric is that Chris Fennell, meanwhile, will only be able to take down 1 of his blockers, not both, because the Tiger only has 5 power.
And there is still mana up for Cedric Phillips to have other actions. I mean, at very least, the Pillar Bug can gain lifelink.
True, true. Yeah, even something like a Chandra's Pyro Helix dealing extra damage to the Tiger afterwards would mean that well, Cedric can at least kill the Tiger after combat. A Subtle Strike would also be a sweet combat trick to have.
Oh,
but
yeah.
He has one in his pool, but he decided not to play it in his deck in order to have more creatures for his vehicles.
It makes sense. He does have a full 5 vehicles, which is high watermark when it comes to vehicles. He's got planes, he's got trains, he's got automobiles.
Yep. Prakata Club Security has 3 or more power, so it will be destroyed by a Sky Whaler shot. So someone basically fired the Club Security into the air,
and then took it right back down again.
Yeah, stapled some fins on it, and then it was shot by the Sky Whalers.
These Sky Whalers, they're pretty unassuming in their... Like, they do not check very carefully whether the things they're shooting are Sky Whales.
Yeah, the Consulate should really look into that.
So as it is, Cedric Phillips, yes, he didn't take a huge amount of damage in that turn, but he's now left with just a single Prakata Pillar Bug up against a pretty hefty board from Chris Fennell, and Chris also got a scry out of all that, went to put it on the bottom of his deck, nice and clearly, so that it was very obvious to Cedric what was going on here.
Yeah, Cedric was ahead in this game early on, especially when Chris Fennell had a bit of a mana stumble. But over the course of the last couple of turns, Chris has easily gained control of the... What's this? Prakata Pillar Bug, 2/3 attacking into a 3/3 Armorcraft Judge. That's suspect, I would say. There are some tricks that are in the format, like the Subtle Strike that we mentioned. There's also a Build to Smash that Cedric actually has in his list, which is perfect on the attack. Gives +3/+3 to an attacking creature. If it's an artifact, also gains trample.
And the lifelink would also be pretty relevant there if you're pumping your creature that much.
Yeah, so if Cedric has that one, has the build to smash, then because of the lifelink of Caterpillar Bug and Cedric being behind in the damage race, it's likely that, well, he's kind of forced to play it anyway. And if that's the case, then Chris definitely doesn't want to block with the Armorcraft Judge. Then again, Cedric also knows that Chris will realize that, so even if Cedric doesn't have to build to smash, he could easily just get in there and bluff it. And another reason why Cedric might do this is, of course, the Demon of Dark Schemes that is in his list. The 5/5 Mythic Demon, I believe, that gives -2/-2 to all creatures when it enters the battlefield. If you have that one, then you're definitely happy to trade a Pillar Bug for the 3/3 Armorcraft Judge.
I mean, the other thing that we need to remember, just in terms of keeping track of what Cedric Phillips has going on, there is still an Oval Chase Daredevil in his graveyard. So while he looks to be kind of operating on not too many resources, if he finds an artifact to get into play, then he can potentially get a little bit more going than it might first seem. It looks like Chris just decided to take it. It felt too risky. It sees a Filigree Familiar from Cedric Phillips. That's going to get back the Oval Chase Daredevil. And does he have the appropriate land to be able to cast it right now? It doesn't look like it, but I mean, even just the 2 life gain from the Filigree Familiar means that, I mean, if you look at the life totals now, things look a lot more interesting for Cedric.
I mean, Chris Fennell is still ahead, but he will have to be a bit more careful now, because there might still be this build to smash coming in, or, well, something else. 9 life, it's not a whole lot, not when you're playing against a red-black deck that might have some direct damage.
I mean, I guess that for Fennell now, he saw that attack come in.
Yeah.
All of the information that he processed about how that attack went is still in the back of his mind. If there was a trick from Cedric before, that trick could still just be there.
Yes. Yeah, as we mentioned, it could be something simple like build to smash. It could be something more crazy like Demon of Dark Schemes. It could be a lot, and if Chris Fennell played around it on the previous turn, he will still try to at least play around it, or at least update this probabilistic estimate of what Cedric might have in hand over the course of the next few turns.
So Cultivator of Blades coming down here for Chris Fennell, and that one, a big deal. He's making 2 servos, so going wide with the big rare Artificer. Just thinking about whether or not he wants to use the free equip from Inventor's Goggles, I think. Looks like he's electing not to. The Cultivator of Blades is an interesting one. Whenever it attacks, it makes Chris's entire team get an additional power equal to Cultivator of Blades power. Obviously great with an equipment. However, it's not a very big creature, so if it attacks, there's a good chance that it will die. As things turn out for now, it can't attack this turn, but more or less everything else from Chris Fennell is hitting the red zone. It's as if he kind of realizes that he might have to accelerate this clock a little bit.
Yep. So that's an attack for 12 at the moment. Right, Tiger, the Sky Skiff, and then
13, because there's the +1/+1 from the goggles.
Indeed. 13 it is. That's that will put down Cedric to a very low life total if he doesn't block. He does have the Filigree Familiar that could block, say, the Scrap Heap Scrounger.
And a Blossoming Defense could just end the game right here. There is mana available for it.
Yes, it is. Yeah, this is a tough spot for Cedric. He is trying to win the game, well, somewhat quickly, because this board state is not going to get better, especially with that Inventor's Goggles. If the game would go long, then that equipment means that you can never really line up good trades, which means that you'd better try to win some kind of damage race and quickly. But blocking a Scrap Heap Scrounger is also not something that he'll be happy to do, because Chris does have the Prophetic Prism, the black mana, to get it back. I don't think Cedric is in a position to really play around Blossoming Defense, the +2/+2 pump spell that you mentioned, unless, well, his hand is completely insane and he can beat literally everything else, but I don't think that's the case.
So he draws a card off that Filigree Familiar dying, and now we see the Cultivator of Blades picking up those goggles. So Cedric Phillips needs to do something big right now.
Yes.
His deck does have the tools to do it. Like, if he happened to have, say, Fleet Wheel Cruiser plus Built to Smash, he could potentially start to put something together here. I don't know whether or not he can quite get to the full 9. Not when there's some blockers available.
I also like how Chris Fennell equipped the Cultivator of Blades right now rather than keeping 2 mana up to get back his Scrap Heap Scrounger. It probably means that Chris was putting Cedric, or putting on at least the possibility of having Demon of Dark schemes. And then you want to have as many creatures with toughness 3 or higher as possible.
Yeah, keeping Cultivator of Blades around, definitely an important piece of the puzzle when it comes to winning this game.
Because remember, Chris still knows that Cedric made his weird attack with the Procata Pillar Bark on the previous turn, which could signal still a whole range of cards. And Chris will have to take that into account in case Cedric makes another attack.
Now, how much does, when you're playing against someone of Chris Fennell's caliber, how much does that alter the way that you play, that you know that you can potentially bluff a little bit more than you might be able to against a player that simply can't sniff out those bluffs?
It definitely matters to some extent. There are players who just play kind of ABC magic whenever a 2-3 is attacking and you can block with a 3-3, you always go for it. Well, against those players you don't want to make some bluffs. Against people where you know that they know the set already inside out and respect you as a player, against those players, when you are in a tough spot, you can easily make some bluffs, and they will often give you some credit for it. Sometimes the best way, if you expect the opponent has a pump spell, is to play right into it, force them to use it, and then bluffs don't really work out well. But it can definitely help against players like Chris Fennell. So that's Furious Reprisal. 2 damage to 2 targets, 1 on the blocker, and then 2 damage to Chris as well.
So still attacking with this Pillar Bug into a creature that can, on the face of things, merrily block it.
And there was the build to smash. Looks like Chris Fennell did... Oh, he did block this time, just to be safe. All right.
So a whole mess of life gain here for Cedric Phillips. A relevant piece. Also gets to get a little hit in here on Chris Fennell. Life total's now 10-5 in Cedric Phillips' favor, but has to pass back for Chris Fennell with potentially a pretty big turn coming.
It's not enough. This is 10 damage. Right. Equip the, or crew the Sky Skiff. Equip on a creature, and that's exactly 10 power. Wow, what a game. Close.
Yeah, really close. Really interesting game as well. Quite a lot of back and forth. Certainly in the early game, it looked like Cedric was in great shape. Chris able to maneuver things round, and big Sky Whaler's shot able to cause some real damage on Cedric Phillips' board. Yeah,
that was probably the one of the key plays there. In this format, there are a lot of double blocks and triple blocks. It's probably because the 4 drops and 5 drops are basically so big that you just have to block them with multiple creatures. But that makes these instant speed removal spells so powerful. Whenever the opponent lines up a double or triple block, just get their biggest creature off the table, and then, well, first of all, your creature still survives. Second of all, you get to kill another creature that effectively chump blocked. That is such a blowout.
And I guess that you've also got the thing of just any time that you're attacking with big creatures and they're forced into multiple blocking, it's not as if they can play around that trick too much, because if they're already multiple blocking, that's kind of signaling that they're potentially in a bit of trouble anyway.
I also really like the mind games going on with Build to Smash. It looked like both players kind of knew what was going on, or at least possibly. Obviously, there were still lots of options that could represent this attack by Cedric, but Build to Smash is a common, and in particular, it's one of those pump spells that Cedric would not have been able to use on the previous turn when he was blocking, because Build to Smash only pumps the creature when it is attacking. And not blocking at first by Chris Fennell definitely seemed good there. Don't really want to turn that Build to Smash into, well, a free terminate on one of your creatures. Ultimately, he had to block, when he lost one of his jumpers and some life total to the Furious Reprisal, and Cedric made another attack, but Chris had probably already done the math and knew that his attack on the next turn would be exactly lethal.
Now, thinking about options for sideboarding, looking at Cedric Phillips' deck, he's got a couple of interesting options available to him. In the main deck, he's very heavy on vehicles. There's the potential that he can bring in the likes of some more sort of general removal for big creatures. But we're going to get a chance to jump across and see how one of our other matches is going. Another 8-0 match. Kerry Howell against Geddes Cooper. And this is already going to game 3. But look at all the rares in play for Geddes Cooper. Ultimately, they're not going to do well enough against the likes of Verdurous Gear Hulk Plus from Kerry Howell. We have our first 9-0 player.
Congratulations to Geddes Cooper. Definitely looks like a solid deck. Verdurous Gear Hulk, Demon of Dark Schemes, Bristling Hydra, collection of good removal spells and other creatures as well. Not too shabby.
So we're back to Cedric Phillips. He's started things off with a Thriving Rats, got his 2 energy, and the 1-2 may well soon be a 2-3 on attacks. There we go. 2 energy turned into 1+1+1 counter. And there's a follow-up in the form of Dund Operative. No artifacts in play just yet, so just a 2-2, but plenty of time for that to change.
Yeah, Cedric's deck has more than enough artifacts. 8, I believe, so quite likely that Dund Operative is going to grow up on the next turn. And
High Spire Artisan here coming down. Just a little bit of a thought about how the Fabricate's going to go. 4 toughness is pretty exciting, but it looks like he's going for a servo in this instance. We'll get a token on
3
that
or
one
4
for you.
toughness doesn't matter all that much. Against the Thriving Rats, well, it's a 2-power creature. The Dund Operative, it's either a 2-power creature or a creature with Death Touch. So I definitely like making the servo there. Fleetwheel Cruiser, meanwhile, that's a big game.
Yeah, gets to attack in for a full 5. No need for crewing this turn. It starts at the top of the hill and it just kind of rolls down and hits your opponent.
Yeah, not only does Chris have no good blocks for the Fleetwheel Cruiser, it also gave Dund Operative Death Touch as well as +1/+0. So yeah, there's not much that Chris can do. He only has 1 power, so he can't really take down any of these creatures. I mean, he can jump block the Dund Operative, I guess, but that's about it. Jump blocking Fleetwheel Cruiser doesn't even work because it has Trample. This does everything.
Yeah, so Chris taking 8 from the runaway car there. Well, the runaway car plus the Operative. And draws for his turn. He's got Hunt the Weak in hand and a 4th land such that he'd be able to cast it, but none of his creatures are particularly good at hunting.
Yep, yeah, I'm more impressed by the Fragmentize. That's at least a good answer to Fleetwheel Cruiser. And if Chris also has another 3-drop in his hand right now, then he would be able to play 2 spells per turn, get back, but looks like he does not.
I mean, Fragmentize, when it deals with a 4-drop, it feels like you ought to be spending more mana than just the 1 anyway. It's not as if it's mana inefficient. He's dealt with 4 mana's worth of things on his turn, but he'd much rather have done more. Big attacks coming in, a block from the High Spire Artisan, and here comes Oval Chase Daredevil from Cedric Phillips, who is unrelenting in his board development.
Well, there was a Wispreaver Angel drawn by Chris Fennell. Good for fighting with Hunter Weak, and it's also good with Visionary Augmenter, blinking it to get some more servos. This could help for sure. On the next turn, let's see, if Cedric attacks with everything, which seems reasonable, there's not much that can really go wrong, then okay, if I'm in Cedric's seat, I'm expecting Chris Fennell to, say, block Dund Operative with Visionary Augmenter, block Thriving Rats with High Spire Artisan, and then maybe double block the Oval Chase Daredevil, which is fine. Cedric is not aware that Chris has the Angel, the Wispreaver Angel in hand, which means that Chris most certainly does not want to block with his Visionary Augmenter right now.
But Cedric puts on the brakes for his vehicle's deck for a turn. Passes with mana up. Here's the Angel. Chris has a target. He wants to flicker it. Does Cedric Phillips have a response? He only has 1 black mana, so the likes of, well, the big removal that he had in Tidy Conclusion in game 1 is not going to be an option for him here. Looks like this one's going to work out. Wispreaver Angel, there you see it. 4/4 flyer for 6. not an incredible rate, but 4/4 flyer is a 4/4 flyer, and when it also brings along a couple more servo friends, or in this case, maybe a couple of +1/+1 counters, a good deal.
There is absolutely that option. I guess a 4-3 is a good blocker for the driving red, so there's certainly some value to that. Also, it will be much better at fighting with Hunter Weak. Chris Fennell may not be happy to play Hunter Weak on a Wisp-Weaver Angel in case Cedric has lots of mana untapped on the next turn in fear of some instant speed removal spell, but maybe more willing to give it a go with a 4-3 Visionary Augmenter. So I like putting counters on rather than making more servos at this point.
So now we see another game where each player is building up a big old board. If it works out that Chris Fennell finds the likes of his Cultivator of Blades, that certainly favors him, and certainly at the moment, with the 4/4 flyer, he's the one with a source of damage. The dangerous thing, of course, being that his life total is 8. Cedric Phillips, even after that attack, still on a whopping 18.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would not say that Cedric Phillips' deck is generally built for the long game, but Demon of Dark Schemes here would be just utterly ridiculous. On top of that, he does have a few sideboard options that are kind of interesting. His natural build at the start of things is to be very much about the aggression and not trying to kill lots of little creatures. Even the likes of Subtle Strike gets kind of interesting from his deck after sideboarding if he wants it.
Yeah, well, meanwhile, Chris is continually attacking in the air, now a Cultivator of Blades, which may allow him... Alright, there's a Welding Sparks along with the Filigree Familiar, taking down the Angel. A Cultivator of Blades along with a board filled with creatures could allow Chris to set up a profitable attack on the next turn. Especially if, let's see, can he do something with Hunter Weak, putting a counter on the Cultivator of Blades and then fighting something small? Looks like that's not possible yet.
I mean, yeah, he has to fight an opposing creature,
yes.
right? He couldn't just go, I'm going to have a sacrificial servo that's going to fight my Cultivator of Blades so it can get the +1/+1 counter.
That is...
I mean, that's not
correct.
how fight typically works, so I would imagine not, but yeah. In any way, him being able to pump his Cultivator Blades would be pretty fantastic here.
It looks like Cedric is not really finding ways to get through here. The Oval Chase Daredevil, well, I guess it could attack, but Cedric does not have any artifacts after that Filigree Familiar to return it from the graveyard.
Looks like there are a couple of good options available here for Fennell. He's got a Propeller Pioneer in hand, and that's the one that he's going to play. Thinking about another servo. So much Fabricate in this deck.
Mm-hmm.
It's practically a theme deck.
Yeah, I like it, especially with the Chief of the Foundry that he has in his deck, and also the Cultivator of Blades that he has on the battlefield. Chris Fennell may be able to set up a lethal attack on the next turn, especially, or perhaps even this turn with the Cultivator of Blades. But if he attacks with everything, this goes all out. Might as well see if this Hunter Weak works before.
All right, here's a response. All right, this is a big play from Cedric Phillips, something that he's sideboarded in. Incendiary Sabotage. So he's sacrificing a Filigree Familiar, one of the best artifacts to sacrifice.
Yep.
And at instant speed, he's going to deal 3 damage to all creatures.
This is incredible. This will basically clear the entire board, especially now that Chris Fennell activated the Skyskiff. Yeah, Chris Fennell did not see this coming for sure. Otherwise, he would have definitely not activated the Skyskiff, played around it. He was probably thinking, hey, Cedric Phillips' deck is super aggressive. It's not really the best home for Incendiary Sabotage, so I'm not going to play around it. But looks like Cedric had it in hand the whole time, was just planning for it the entire game. And now the tables have turned.
Oh, very much so, yeah. And even gets a cheeky attack in. Both of these players working on haste creatures coming into play, but Chandra's Pyrohelix coming from Cedric Phillips, enough to close out that game. And what a bit of sideboarding from Cedric Phillips, able to take what appeared to be just a terrible, terrible board situation for him, brings in Incendiary Sabotage, finds a time to use it to completely clear the board, and from there cleans it up with a very aggressive deck.
Yep.
We are going to a game 3 here. Each of these players just clinging on in a way of trying to find the 9-0 finish here at GP Atlanta. We'll be back to them soon enough, but here we have Mason King against Kenneth Cordell. They're in their game 3, and Cordell leaning very hard on a Whirlermaker here. He's not got too much going on. Meanwhile, the red-black deck of Mason King, a few more permanents in play.
All right, so Whirlermaker, one of the better mana sinks in the format. But let's see, it can make a Thopter token here. The Thopter can block the Foundry's creature. Then the Iron League Steed could block something else. But now there's another Puzzle Knot. Along with Reckless Fireweaver, it effectively deals 2 damage when it enters. So 1 damage to Kenneth.
And a big set of swings here. We could have arrived at an opportune moment.
Well, making a Thopter and blocking the Foundry's creature is not going to do it. Then Kenneth will take 6. Unless he has, well, basically 2 effects, 2 removal spells. It's going to be it.
There's a handshake. Mason King, you will be one of our 9-0 players here at GP Atlanta. Exactly where you want to be overnight. Obviously, this is a 2-day event. There's still going to be a full day of drafting tomorrow. 2 drafts before we hit our top 8. Big smiles from both these players in the feature match area. You know, they know that they're going to be drafting tomorrow. They know that they're going to be in fantastic shape for top 8. It's just a matter of the details at this point. Can they finish with an undefeated record on day 1? They both know that their decks are good, and so kind of being able to milk every win that you can out of your good deck is a big deal, because drafts can go wrong. Even if you are a world-class drafter, as these players are both, they've been around the block a few times. Cedric Phillips, he's going back to the Pro Tour in Hawaii for his first Pro Tour in a while, and they both know what they're doing in draft, but sometimes, you read the signals strangely, the packs don't quite work out how you'd like. These decks they know are good. So they're really going to want to get this last game win in and advance undefeated overnight.
Absolutely. Now, what I will be wondering is whether Cedric boarded out the Incendiary Sabotage, because he didn't play it in his main deck. He boarded it in specifically for this matchup, but now Chris Fennell knows Cedric had access to it and will easily play around it. That might be the situation where you actually want to board it out, because Incendiary Sabotage, even though it's very good against Chris Fennell's specific deck, it wasn't all that impressive in Cedric's deck, because he doesn't have that many artifacts apart from the Filigree Familiar that he's happy to sacrifice. So
yeah, the vehicles are exactly the things you want to keep around during all of that. There is a vehicle for Chris Fennell in the Sky Skiff, and there you see Dundee Operative from Cedric Phillips. Avery Mechanic just coming down as a 2-2 this turn for Christopher Fennell. On other occasions, he might use it to bounce one of his Fabricate creatures, but this time round, just wants to play a 2-2, does not elect to crew his vehicle with it, instead sitting back with the ability to crew his Sky Skiff as a blocker.
Yep. And what will Cedric have? If Cedric has an artifact, then sure, he can attack with his Dundee Operative, but Chris will probably be happy to trade his 2-2 with no ability for a 3-2 Death Touch. Or perhaps if Chris feels like he's going to be vehicle flooded, he could even trade his Sky Skiff, but Chris Fennell's is not all that super heavy on vehicles. Renegade Freighter, on the other hand, the train is ready to roll. Oh, it's not.
Yeah, fragmentize enough to derail that train, and there's also an appetite for the unnatural in hand for Christopher Fennell. So the next big vehicle, the Cultivator's Caravan, that's come along right on time, also being dealt with straight away by Chris Fennell. This time round, he gets full use of his mana on the turn he fragmentizes. It does look like that fragmentizes destroying some Inventor's Goggles, which is kind of ironic given that he's playing some in his deck. But Chris Fennell does not mind too much. He's gained a bit of life there, as Cedric Phillips chooses to do the same, albeit with a Filigree Familiar.
Yeah, the Fragmentize being another sideboard card. The sideboard cards so far have been the MVPs of the last 2 games.
And then we see Propeller Pioneer coming down for Chris Fennell. Actually, 2 copies of them in the pool for Cedric Phillips. The surprising amount of similarities in some areas of the pools that each of these players had if they'd chosen to go different colors. Quite a lot of good white cards available to Cedric Phillips. He instead, of course, elected to go with red-black, and it's hard to argue with that decision based on how he's gone with it. Another Dund operative for him there as he crashes in. Both these players now on 20 and swinging for the fences. Plenty of flyers coming in for Chris Fennell. Cedric Phillips having to just take that, and Whiskweaver Angel meaning that the Propeller Pioneer getting flickered and a +1/+1 counter on the Fabricate.
Yeah, this was looking to be somewhat of a fair and close damage race, but that 6 mana Angel definitely changed some things around, adding so much power to the board. And Cedric was a bit stalled on lands, only had 3 lands on the battlefield. His Cultivator's Caravan was actually destroyed. Now, Welding Sparks will take down the Angel, and that's a relevant swing. Using 3 mana to deal with a 6-drop is exactly what you need when you're a bit behind on mana. And, well, it will help Cedric establish the damage race back into close territory.
And it looks like Chris Fennell still has plenty of gas in the tank. Casts a Riparian Tiger, gets his 2 energy, immediately cruises Skyskiff and swings in.
Yep.
I mean, this may be where we see the green-white deck of Chris Fennell just edging ahead a little bit. It does have some naturally larger creatures if he wants to. Cedric Phillips, yes, if he can get up 6 mana, he's got that Demon of the Dark schemes to work with. But right now, not having the same number of lands in play as Chris Fennell is kind of hurting him. At some point, having more spells than lands might be great, but for now, he just needs to be casting plenty of threats.
Well, Cedric found his 5th land. We'll see what he can do with it. He kind of needs a removal spell for the Tiger, because like a 6/6 trample coming in on the next turn along with all of those flyers, it's going to be tough to contend with. Cedric does have Dund operative to trade for the Tiger, but then he still takes 4 trample damage in the process, which is not great. However, if Cedric would have something like a Tidy Conclusions in hand or an Unlicensed Disintegration to kill, say, Propeller Pioneer, then trading for the Tiger with the Dund operative and taking some trample damage is not all that bad, because then there's no longer a huge flying threat on the other side. Even a lowly Chandra's Pyrohelix would help here. But yeah, I don't think Cedric is in a good position to win a damage race here. Not easily, so I'll have to go for answers to Chris Fennell's permanents, in particular the flyers.
Now we're closing in on the final stages of this round. It's 1-1. Time has actually been called on the regular play area. I believe that we're a couple of minutes behind here in the feature match area. Neither of these players wants to pick up a draw. And that's part of the reason that we're seeing a kind of accelerated pace of play after 2 games that have gone kind of long. Bastion Mastodon for Cedric Phillips in a deck that does not produce white mana, simply a 4/5 for 5, but a 4/5 for 5 is pretty hefty.
It's also an aggressive attack by Cedric here. Fleetwheel Cruiser. Now there is a lot of trample hasty power. Let's see, 5 power with a flying. Cedric could block the Fleetwheel Cruiser, but then he still takes 6 from the Tiger. I don't think there is a way to survive for Cedric.
Yeah, tapped out, which makes it easy for Chris. He's basically explained what's going on and extended his hand and gone, look, I've got this. And yeah, you can see there, Cedric, at the last hurdle, he only had maybe 2 more turns of attacks that he needed in order to advance the perfect 9-0. He got past Matt Severa's bomb-laden monster of a deck in round 8. But round 9, Christopher Fennell, he's going to be sat pretty at the top of the standings going in overnight. Big plays here from him. And really very, very interesting to me watching these decks that are not as bomb-laden as some of the other ones we see in the format excelling at the very highest level. Yeah,
it's just good stuff. Solid green-white deck. Creatures, pump spells, a removal spell or 2. Just clean, fair magic.
I love it. Yep. But that is our end of round here in round 9. It's 10. We're starting at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we do hope you'll join us because it's draft day tomorrow. And if you think that sealed deck is fun in this format, you ain't seen nothing yet. Kaladesh draft a huge amount of build around, some very aggressive decks, some very powerful decks. We really hope that you can join us. But for now, we are going to take a break. Please do join us again on twitch.tv/magic tomorrow. But from me, Tim Willoughby, and from Hall of Famer Frank Karsten, bidding you a good night from Grand Prix Atlanta.